Why have Jewish people faced so much hatred throughout history? I mean, it's been a lot, and it's a long story. They were enslaved by the Egyptians in the first pages of the Bible. They were shunned by medieval Europe. 1/3 of all Jews living in the 1930s were murdered in the Holocaust. And even today, it doesn't take much to spark hatred towards Jews. Hey, I'm Ken LaCourte, and this is a big, uncomfortable question. I researched it pretty heavily, and I'll do what I can to give you the best of what I found in the least biased way I can. We'll look at the concept of Jewish distinction, which has been ingrained into Judaism for thousands of years. We'll take a close look at how jealousy towards Jewish success and power has played a part, as well as how true and not so true anti-Semitism charges affect the equation, as well as the ongoing Palestinian conflict. But first, let's be clear. Jews are far from the only victims around. Racism, xenophobia, and bigotry are an ugly and ongoing part of human history. Across every era and place, you'll find people being persecuted for their ethnicity or their beliefs. We've seen the Cambodian genocide, the Rwandan genocide, Mao's Cultural Revolution, Soviet purgers, the Armenian genocide. It goes on and on. When times get bad, people often look for somebody to blame. Minorities, immigrants, and religious groups often become easy scapegoats. Some evolutionary psychologists argue this whole us versus them idea is hardwired into our nature, a survival mechanism from our tribal past. I mean, early humans stayed alive by forming close-knit groups that often competed for resources with others. A stranger often meant violence, or even when they were friendly, exposure to unknown sicknesses that could destroy an entire tribe. But the hatred towards Jews has been uniquely intense. Despite being a tiny fraction of the world's population, Jews have faced expulsion, massacre, discrimination in virtually every part of the world they've lived. It's been stubbornly persistent across centuries and cultures. So what is it about Jews that has made them such a consistent target of hatred and suspicion? The answer is complex, but Jewish identity has always been deeply entwined with distinctiveness and separation. It goes all the way back to the Torah, the founding religious text of Judaism. Over centuries, religious commands to maintain a distinct identity shaped Jewish practice in profound ways. The ancient Israelites developed strict dietary laws, like prohibition on eating pork or shellfish. They followed a unique calendar with holidays like Passover and Yom Kippur that set them apart from their neighbors. They wore, and often still do, distinctive clothing that made them look different from those around them. These practices created a strong sense of Jewish community and solidarity. In ancient times, this often brought them in conflict with the conquerors who demanded cultural conformity, from the Babylonians to the Romans. Jewish commitment to their faith in the face of persecution was seen as stubborn, and it planted the seeds for centuries of stereotyping, scapegoating, and conspiracy theories. But the story of anti-Semitism can't be told without talking about Christianity as well. I mean, after all, Christianity began as a Jewish sect, and Jesus himself was a Jew. His crucifixion story, told via the Gospels written decades later, depict Jewish religious leaders as the bad guys, accusing Jesus of blasphemy and conspiring with Roman authorities to have him executed. And over time, Christianity institutionalized this narrative of collective guilt, positioning Christians as God's new chosen people and Jews as spiritual outcasts. As Christianity grew, Jews were cast as the antithesis to Christian virtues, and Christianity grew amazingly fast. I mean, there's about 165 Christians in the world for every Jew. But the values of Judaism led them to great successes in the world, and those successes also helped fuel distrust and hatred towards them. Throughout history, jealousy of rich and controlling Jews has been a thing. In medieval Europe, Jews were prohibited from owning land, joining trade guilds, and working in most professions. They were forced into fringe economic roles like money lending, which Christians were barred from pursuing. This occupational segregation was enforced by religious law and social customs. Over time, many Jews found success in finance, and they developed networks of credit and trade across Europe and the Mediterranean. Some rose to prominent positions as court bankers and advisors to kings and nobles, and that made them targets, especially in bad times. When crops failed or markets collapsed, Jews were blamed, accused of exploitation or hoarding wealth. The Nazis took economic anti-Semitism to its most extreme and murderous conclusion. They portrayed Jews as parasites and exploiters, controlling banks and media as part of a conspiracy to subvert Germany. The final solution was partly an attempt to eliminate this imagined Jewish stranglehold on the economy. This took on new forms in more recent years. The stereotype of the rich Jew was updated, and people made sweeping assumptions about Jews being lawyers or controlling Hollywood. And here's where I have to be careful. not to feed into bad stereotypes, but also not to blindly assume that every one of them is evil.
This week on Larry King Live, Marlon Brando made the shocking statement that Hollywood is, quote, run by Jews. In response, outraged Jewish organizations made it snow in New York in April.
Now, the snow part was a joke, but the Hollywood entertainment industry was largely created by a group of ambitious Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe. Words like control can be dangerously overused, but throughout the 50s, that studio system completely dominated the film industry. And to this day, Jewish Americans play a strong role in it. Jews have long placed a high value on education, literacy, and professional achievement. And many Jews have risen to the top of their chosen fields, thanks to a combination of ability and communal support. For a group that's about 2% of America, Jews have earned themselves an outsized role in a number of powerful fields. But that's very different from the concept of Jewish globalists secretly controlling world events. And it also ties to another accusation that we hear a lot, the one of dual loyalty. It's the idea that Jews are more loyal to Israel or a global Jewish agenda than to their own countries. And it plays on those ancient fears of Jews as a shadowy cabal with their own allegiances. It's also reinforced by the fact that up until the mid-20th centuries, most Jews weren't citizens of the countries where they lived. They were often seen as owing their allegiance to a global Jewish community rather than to any particular country. And a lot of American Jews feel a strong connection to Israel, and that influences their politics. Israel is both the center of the Jewish religion and has, for millions of Jews, been a safe refuge when other countries went bad for them. Pro-Israeli lobbying organizations like AIPAC give a lot of money to U.S. politicians, and the United States gives a lot of money in support to Israel. $4 billion a year in a typical year, and closer to $18 billion last year. And when some progressive politicians spoke out strongly against Israel, a lot of Jewish money helped defeat them in elections. Now, people should be able to debate about America's relationship with Israel without being branded anti-Semitic. And some Jewish leaders are quick, sometimes too quick, to play that card. Now, given the history of anti-Semitism, many Jews are rightly sensitive to anything that sounds remotely anti-Jewish. The memory of the Holocaust is still raw, and the fear of resurgent anti-Semitism is a real thing. I mean, it was only 80 years ago that train tracks ended at death camps in Nazi Germany, where millions were murdered. I mean, there are still people alive today who were around back then. And it's not always easy to distinguish between honest disagreement and veiled bigotry. For instance, some say the term Israel lobby is an anti-Semitic dog whistle, suggesting a shadowy Jewish influence over American politics. Others say it's an accurate description. The Jewish Anti-Defamation League offers other examples. In their polling of what they call anti-Semitic questions, some are clearly that. But others, like the statement, Jews stick together more than other Americans, don't seem very anti-Semitic to me and have a large degree of truth. There have even been recent attempts in America to outlaw boycotting Israel, or even supposedly anti-Semitic speech, actions that completely violate America's concept of free speech. Things like that not only create a backlash, but they make it harder to confront genuine anti-Jewish hate. There can also be a confusing overlap between criticism of Jews in general versus the action of Israel. And no look at modern anti-Semitism would be complete without looking at the long-running conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. The horrific October 7th attacks on Israel sparked a rare bit of sympathy for the country. But the resulting war in Gaza sparked hate that went far beyond protesting a war. People were harassed for speaking Hebrew in public. Holocaust memorials were defaced with swastikas and slurs. Jewish-owned businesses were vandalized not for supporting a war, but just for being Jewish. And elite college campuses in the United States and elsewhere often just denigrated into anti-Semitic environments. Under the guise of being anti-war, people who hated Jews had a field day. I mean, more Ukrainians have died at the hands of the Russians, who launched a totally unprovoked war against them, but you don't see anywhere near the level of vitriol against them in other countries. Once again, Jews are treated differently. Now, this isn't a video to get into the history of that conflict, but it does present a kind of a classic chicken and egg scenario. Do people dislike Israel because of their behavior towards Palestinians? Or is 2,000 years of anti-Jewish hate the real cause of that conflict? Or maybe, as is often the case, a bit of both. One thing that I'm relatively certain of, though, is that Israel will actually keep winning the battles against its neighbor, if for no other reason than cultural differences and history. Because when you look into it, Arab armies virtually always lose wars against Western powers. In fact, the last time an Arab regime won a major battle against the West was in 1187 AD. That was a long time ago. The reasons why are complicated and cultural issues are at the heart of them, and you might like this video. Hey, thanks for watching. I love researching these and sharing what I learned with you. If you thought I did a good job, come back again. All right, thanks.